And I mean that you have to find your community. You have to get out there. Sometimes you have to cultivate community. We really learned to do that. My husband and I hosted. So I mentioned briefly that our marriage was tough, and that was because of me in the beginning. I don't think our marriage would have survived had we not become believers, just because I was so over it. We went to a marriage conference, and at that marriage conference, they shared with us really what is the biblical view of marriage. And it just blew our mind, because I had been schooled on how to be in a marriage by romantic comedies of the 80s and 90s. I love a good romantic comedy, but it's not the best marriage advice. You know, a romantic comedy tells you should be happy, it should be easy, it should be fun. That is not what our marriage looked like. A biblical view of marriage is it's sacrificial. You give 100% and 100%. It's not 50-50. And really, you love your spouse sacrificially. You respect your spouse if you're the wife. It just dramatically changed our marriage. And at that conference, they shared that there were these small group guides that you could take this content back and you could have been sharing it with people around you. And at that point, we'd moved 4 times. We had most of our friends were military, and we said, this is stuff. We got to start sharing it. So we began doing that. We did that for the rest of the 11 moves. We would just show up, boots on the ground, barely unpack our boxes, maybe even not all of them, and start hosting people in our home. Because marriage is hard, but military marriages might be a little bit harder. Our divorce statistics are worse, especially in the veteran population when they're done serving.
Everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. We're going to go on a trip to get today because our author is here on the podcast. And she's written a great new book that's out there in the world. You are going to love it, especially if you have any type of military background. You know anyone who has served their country in a very special way. They're going to get a lot out of this conversation and a lot out of a great new book as well. Beth is here on the podcast. Excited to have her on. Beth, welcome to Living the Next Chapter.
Thank you so much, Dave. It's an honor to be with you, and appreciate you trusting me with your audience.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm so excited to have you here. It's great. Congratulations on your new book.
Thank you. It's exciting.
Excellent. We're going to get into this. Where are you currently living in your great country? Where are you now?
Right now, I live in Colorado, and we've lived here for 7 years since my husband retired. We love it here. It's amazing. There are no bugs and no humidity.
No bugs. Well, that should be on the sign when you come into town.
It's my bugs. Favorite part.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, we don't even have a bug service here. I've never lived where you don't need a bug service.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's something I didn't know. I like that. Now, your background, though, I kind of alluded to a lot of travel, a lot of moving. You have moved a lot in your past. Why is that?
So my husband was in the military. I actually moved a little bit with my own career even before I began following him on the great adventure of the military family life. But during his 25 years of service, we actually moved 14 times. So I've lived all over the world, mostly all over the U.S., and we moved an average of every 1.7 years in our life. So wow. I know how to unpack boxes.
You must be good at packing and unpacking and just organizing. All of those are traits you're going to learn, right?
Yes. The military does offer you the option that they will send in packers and pack up your stuff for you. Not everyone does that because sometimes your stuff gets ruined, or some people just like to have more control. We did use the packers though, but in order to get ready for a move, I would, for several months before our moves, depending upon how long we'd stay there and how out of order things had gotten, I would pretty much comb through all of our belongings, clean out, purge, organize, put things where they go. I always say we were very organized right when we had moved in and then right when we were about to leave again. But it actually was a blessing. Now we've been in this house for 4 years, and it's so weird to me to not be forced to go through purge and organize. So I've got to put it on my calendar once I'm done with all this book stuff.
There you go. Because I would think you'd be like eyeballing like a box. And you're like, oh, I'm going to keep that box. I'm going to need that in like a year and a half from now.
You know, some people do that. Yeah, some people will actually not unpack all of their boxes. They will have 10 to 20 or more boxes that they don't unpack, that they just move around. And then what ends up happening is when they're done with the military career, they actually open those boxes and they say, why did we keep all this stuff?
Yeah,
Our thought was, if we don't need it, this move, we're going to go ahead and get rid of it. Because whenever I saw, like, for Christmas, when we would get new things, to me, it kind of created some anxiety because I knew that was more things to unpack.
Right. So is it kind of like a purging lifestyle too? Like you're like, I'm going to continuously get rid of things I don't need all the time. Is that part of this whole thing?
Yes. So we would usually load up a truck or an SUV multiple times prior to the move and then after the move. Not everyone does that, but you also live in a variety of different sizes of houses. For example, when we lived in Korea, we lived in a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, 800 square foot apartment. We did not bring all of our household goods with us. We knew we were going to be living in small quarters. But it just teaches you to live with less. Again, not everyone does that, but for me, I knew we were moving every 1 to 2 years, and I did really want us to feel at home for as little of time as we had. So I would, try to set up house. I hung curtains. I put up pictures on the wall because I wanted our home to be a place of refuge, even if we were only there for a year, and just to create some stability for our children.
How do you set down roots for your kids? Like school, all of that. How do you have any semblance of this is home? Like besides, like, I know putting up the pictures and all that, that's great. But for your kids' sake, how do you do that?
Well, to be honest, it's hard. Yeah. I did really seek to do the research before we moved and make as many connections as we could to plug in quickly, not only for my kids, but for me also. I wanted to feel home for as long as we were going to be there and make those connections and really, invest in others. We did make the decision to homeschool. Not everyone does that. I'm not saying it's always the right decision. But we were moving so frequently, and your children, they're doing a lot to improve for the Department of Defense and then schools around the bases to try to improve the continuity of the kids' education. But, you're always changing states, countries, school systems. So one of the reasons we chose to homeschool was for continuity of our kids' education. But also my husband went to training quite a bit. And with these trainings on our own dime, we could go with him. And so we chose to homeschool because there are times when they absolutely can't be with the family. They're deployed, they're on TDY, they're at war. And so we chose to have that lifestyle. Now, it was hard. I'm not going to lie. It was hard at times. Yeah. But we chose to do that to maximize the time that we were together as a family. And that's probably how we created stability for them, is we sought to be together as much as we absolutely could. And my husband did work long hours. He did have to, work nights at seasons. And we honestly, we flexed our schedule a lot to try to have time with him. And you had to be patient. And honestly, you can't do it well unless you have a belief that God is ultimately in control and that he's watching over all of you.
So from your family's perspective, what is the best thing about moving that often?
I think just all of life you get to experience and the wonderful, amazing people you get to meet. I think back, like, so many of my friends from high school, they are still living in their hometown. They're still friends with all the same people. And I'm not meaning to speak negatively of my high school friends. They're great people, but my Facebook is full of, I probably have 1,500 friends, and almost all of them are military friends of people that we've connected with, or people that live in the surrounding towns on where we've been stationed, and just some incredible people, and people that honestly I would have never been friends with, had the military life not made us cross paths. Just such a life broadening experience. To live in a foreign country and get to visit them and see a different culture. There's some great things about some of the other countries, but it also really makes you appreciate the freedoms that we have in the United States. Yeah. And then appreciate the people who do sacrifice their life for the freedoms we enjoy. And I know you're in Canada, so it's similar in Canada because your country is very similar to ours, right? Your people that are serving in the armed forces, it's similar. They're sacrificing for the freedoms that you enjoy in your nation.
Yeah, and I'm glad that your family gets to be together for the most part. I know there's times, seasons where you guys aren't all together, but the fact that you can travel as a family, that's good, right? To
Yeah,
be
I mean,
back in the U.S. and your husband's gone for an extended length of time, you don't see him at all, that's got to be really rough.
it is rough. Yeah, it is rough, and it's never easy.
Yeah.
But you learn coping skills. You learn independence, but also you have to learn how to ask for help at times too, because you are only one person, and military spouses can tend to be a bit over independent sometimes, because we are having to steer the ship often and adjust. And I mean, the military member that's serving in arms, they're often getting ready when they move for the next mission, for the next position. We are running the home and getting all the connections for the kids. But we do, I think self-care is something that I learned was important to prioritize. I don't mean self-indulgent self-care, but, something for me that's going to be life-giving, especially when that spouse is deployed, because it can be really hard day in, day out to do all the parenting, taking care of the home, handling all the issues with kids, family. You do need something that is going to give you life, but also really help you be more patient.
Yeah.
I think it's better to maybe not be with my kids 24/7, to have that break so that when I am with them, I'm all there and I am the best version of me. So that's something I learned maybe the hard way.
So now in all of this, you sit down and say, you know what, I'm going to write a book about my journey, my story. How did this idea come to write your book?
Yeah. So I actually did not have a lifelong dream to be an author. And I know that's pretty unusual for an author. One of the ways that I coped with the military life, I did become a believer, a Christian during our journey. And that's a whole nother part of my story. But I began leading women in Bible study in my home because I realized how life-giving it was for me to be in the scriptures and to know God's character and to know that he cared about me and he could be relied upon. So often we were sitting on the floor of my living room house in various base houses that aren't the nicest houses you've ever been in. I was willing to open my home because I wanted to open my heart to others. And so throughout the years, I led them in many, many Bible study workbooks. And they were all great and we all got something out of it. And the neat part about being engaged in Bible study with other military spouses is you have the same struggles. You have the same challenges. But I remember thinking often, why has somebody not written some biblically based content to address our specific challenges? Loneliness, waiting, husband gone, moving again, all the uncertainty, all the chaos. And so when COVID happened, I enrolled in seminary, and I'm a learner. I love to learn. I love the Word of God. And it was in seminary that God began to speak to me that perhaps I was being equipped to write that book, to give military spouses something that is specifically contextualized for their life and their challenges. And so I wrote a proposal. I went to a writers and speakers conference. I pitched it to agents, and absolutely amazingly, I got an agent and I got a book deal. And truly it's a testament to God, because that's not a normal path.
No.
And I actually got probably my absolute dream publisher. It's something I would have never asked God for. So I'm published with Lifeway. It's actually B&H Publishing, which is their trade book division. Those are the majority of the workbooks I had used over the years. But I think God just placed me in front of people that saw the tough life of the military community and were burdened for it.
So writing the book, the process of writing it, how did it change you personally?
Well, it was really fun.
Yeah.
But I'm a nerd. I loved doing the research. I loved writing. I loved... one of the things I'm really passionate about is understanding the original culture of the time before we study the scripture, because it just makes it absolutely come alive and be so much more meaningful. Our culture here in the 21st century is so incredibly different from the culture of the biblical times. So I did a lot of research to that. That was really fun. The writing was really fun too. I mean, it took time. So I really enjoyed it. The hard part is all the marketing and the launch and the creating the graphics and doing the social media posts and trying to get a following. But honestly, because it is hard, it just made me rely on the Lord more and honestly, the power of prayer. Because I have felt that this task is beyond what I can do every single day.
That's a little humbling too in the same process, right? Yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so we chatted a little bit in a little pre-chat earlier, and we kind of talked about some of the things we talked about today. I love this kind of question from my guests, is if, as a new reader of your book, I've bought it, it's in my lap, I'm ready to read it. Before I read a single word, what is your love letter to the reader from this book? Like, what do you want me to know? What are your hopes for me as a reader as I read your book?
Right. Well, first of all, consider my audience is a military spouse. Although I do think that it could relate to someone who also is married to somebody who has to move very frequently. In the beginning, I hated the military. I hated everything about it. It was such an inconvenience to my life. We moved 3 times our first year of marriage. Then we showed up. We unpacked our boxes for that 3rd time. And he deployed to the Middle East. My husband and I had dated long distance, so I didn't really know anything about the military, what to expect. And now I'm very thankful for that because he's a really great man and I'm happily married, but I wouldn't have married him if I would have known what I was signing up for. Yeah. So I just hated it. And so my husband's deploying. He actually deployed 4 times in the 2.5 years we were there. He also went to training for 7 weeks. And he evacuated with the hurricanes several times because they're multi-million-dollar jets and they need to be safe. So he left me at home to deal with no electricity and flooding. So right now when we're recording this, Hurricane Helene has just come through Florida and the East Coast. And I'm so burdened for those military spouses because I know when they were dealing with that flooding and the downed trees and the low electricity, they were doing it alone. Because same thing happens with our Navy. They go off with the ships. Same thing with the Army. They protect the equipment. So the biggest thing that God did in my life and that I really want readers to realize is that if you are married to someone serving in arms in the uniform, they have a calling on their life. It's not just a job. A calling is defined as something that someone feels a special obligation or duty to perform. Often we use that term calling to talk about clergy. But I really believe it's so appropriate for the military. And once I began to realize that, this is not just a job to my husband. It's a duty. He feels he has to do it. God then began to show me that because he had caused me to marry this military man, which again, I didn't know anything about that, that I also had a calling on my life. And no, I don't pick up the weapons. No, I don't put on the uniform. But we were moving very frequently. And I believe that God wanted to use me to impact the military community and all those I came in contact with in those many locations to point them to Jesus and the abundant life that's found in following him and minister to them in Jesus' name. My husband was in command. And when you're in command, you have a lot of opportunity to minister to the families. That's another way the military is different. It's not just a job. You support the whole family. And just like in the rest of the culture, there's a lot of brokenness in military families. And so we were able to minister to them and serve them just like it was a ministry, love on them and do that because we know Jesus and what he's done for us. And so I just no longer saw myself as in my husband's shadow. It was like, I'm just going to jump on board because if God has put me in this marriage, and I believe marriage is a lifelong covenant, then I have a purpose and my purpose is aligned with him. It doesn't mean I don't have things I can't do on my own. I've gotten my master's degree. I work in ministry now. I homeschooled my kids. I was always involved in things. But part of my purpose in life is to impact lives as I move around. So just, embracing that. And then also realizing I see a lot of military spouses with a lot of regret and resentment about the changes that the military requires. And I just want to say, I'm here at the other side of the journey now. It is just a season in your life. And there is so much other time in your life when you can do all those dreams that you had that perhaps you had to put on the back burner. I mean, what I'm doing now, I never would have imagined. I was just the lady who supported the home and unpacked the boxes and kept the small humans alive. But it's amazing. And I honestly, there's a big part of me that misses it. When my husband said he was going to retire, I was like, what? These are our people. This is what we do, who we invest in. I don't know how to be a civilian. But then, God opened a door for us to continue to minister to the military. So that's what we do full time now. We actually do Christian ministry focused on the military, and we love it.
That's amazing. Yeah. And to be so involved in the military and then to leave, I think there's an identity crisis that seems to happen for a lot of people that I've talked to that have served their country. Is what do I do next? Like, what is my purpose? What is my reason to get up in the morning? And I kind of lose that friendship, those my comrades, the people I'm with all the time, and I'm starting this whole new life with really no idea what's next. So I love that you have this as your purpose.
Yes, and we engage with couples, parenting, but we also spend about half of our time with cadets at the Air Force Academy. So doing one-on-one discipleship, premarital counseling for them, and that's really neat too. Just how God had a special purpose even for us for that. I'm an infertile woman. I have an adopted child. And one time that God opened my womb and we had 4 failed adoptions after our daughter. And, this is just a way that God has put all of my life together. So now I have all these hundreds of spiritual children that I get to invest in that come in my home. They were just all here last night, a bunch of them. And it's just really fulfilling. It's not the children that I thought I was going to get to raise, but it's really joyful because they are my children's age, but they're not my kids. So they want my wisdom. They want to listen to me. They enjoy, being here. They want to come over here. And so, for 10 whole years, I didn't know why God had closed the doors on adoption to us. And it's because he wanted us to do this. He did have children for us. They're just spiritual children.
See, I love how people can pour their lives into other people and have an impact. That's amazing.
Well, it's super rewarding.
Yeah. For you then, for the book, how much of this is a love letter to your audience in that context that you really want to pour back into people through the book?
Oh, I think that's the whole purpose of it, really. Yeah, that's the whole purpose of it. But I did go through, I originally understood Jesus' sacrifice for us in my first Bible study, and that was about 4 years into my military marriage. And God opened the scriptures to me in Genesis. That's where I started, and we started with Sarah and Abraham's story. And part of the reason God got a hold of me was because I saw parallels in Sarah's life to mine. God called Sarah and Abraham to leave their family, leave their home, and come follow him. And basically, they were the first believers in Yahweh after the flood. So they were moving and transitioning often, only they were doing it like on the backs of animals. Like I at least had moving vans and movers.
Yeah.
They were resettling. Abraham went off and fought in combat. And a lot of people don't think of Abraham as a warrior, but he did go rescue his nephew Lot with his 318 servants. They went and fought against 4 kings and their armies. And so if you think about that, you think that really seems to be Abraham outnumbered. And, he's just a shepherder and raises animals. But really, what I saw in that was absolutely God's muscle on display because he enabled Abraham to outpower all those armies by his clout and his might. And so I imagined, Sarah was at home in her home tent while Abraham was off deploying, and she was probably terrified. So I saw these parallels, and it just made me feel so incredibly seen by God that in his sovereignty and his control, that the very first time I would ever read the Bible for my own self was in Sarah and Abraham's account where I saw this. So I really wanted to portray that and show the military spouse that God sees them, that he cares, that they are not just in their husband's shadow. And so I did that by taking the reader through Genesis 12 through 22, through Sarah and Abraham's story. And they had many challenges, sometimes when they made good choices and sometimes when they didn't. But I related each portion of scripture to the military life. And most of that is through telling a bit of my own story or just relating what I saw in the scriptures and how does that relate. So I cover topics like loneliness, waiting, the importance of prayer, moving, resettling. How do you solo parent? About each page or each day of study is 1,000 words. About 200 of it is this contextualization from Abraham and Sarah's story to the military life. But then the rest of the 800 words is really just unpacking the scripture and what are the lessons that God has to teach it.
Nice. What are some of the early responses you've had from people who have read through the book, people who have read early copies of it? What kind of feedback came back to you? Anything surprise you at all?
Not really. I mean, it's been incredibly encouraging. Some of the things that I have heard is I feel seen. I can't believe that my story is relatable in the Bible.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, the responses have been exactly what I wanted. Now, the early readers are all military spouses, and they are people I know. Some of them I only know over the internet. But honestly, when you are writing a book, especially when you're marketing a book, there are days that you say, is this worth it? Is this even going to make a difference? Is all of the time and effort I've put into it worth it, right? Is anyone ever going to even read these words? And the responses that I've seen, even if no one else reads the book, besides the women that have read it, it was worth it because they've gotten the message that I attempted to portray, that they are so seen and they're encouraged and they're hopeful.
How would you have responded to this book being handed to you as a military family, and somebody walked up and handed you a copy of this book to you for the first time and you're reading it? How do you think you would have responded to have this?
Incredible hope.
Yeah. Oh, good. I like how you said that. Okay, expand on that a little bit.
I just think that just seeing your purpose, your purpose and being encouraged and knowing. I tried to portray each day of the study that I see their challenges, that I know them, that I'm right there with them. I empathize. I know it's hard, and so does God. So I think as a military spouse, you can so often feel so alone that nobody understands, that nobody gets your life. And so that's also one of the things is I wanted to portray, but not point them to me or to my words as something that's going to bring them out, really to the life-giving word of God that's going to bring them out, right? Because this is just one book, but what they need is to continue to get in it, to hear God's love letter to them.
So Beth, who was in your corner throughout writing the book and all that? Who from your community, your family, your support group, who has kind of been there? Some people come to mind as we talk through this that you would like to kind of comment on or address in the podcast? I know they're going to listen to this, but your thoughts for them, as well.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I have to thank my husband. He's been incredibly supportive. He has so he achieved the rank of colonel in the military, and he was a group commander as his last job. He had, 1,500 people reporting to him. He's an excellent leader, and he has totally humbled himself during this period. My husband now does the majority of the cleaning of our house. He's really good at it, by the way.
Good.
My kids used to have to clean our house, and I would have to inspect what I expect. I don't have to do that with him. He's really good. But yeah, just all the things he's picked up at home, and then just being my cheerleader and believing that God could have a message to share through me. But the other group of women is I have about 40 women that I've asked to pray for me, and I sent them a very detailed prayer plan a year and a couple of months before the book launch to begin praying, because I really believe the fact that I even have a book deal speaks to the power of God. And this isn't about success to me. This is about being faithful and obedient to God. And really, that's what I asked them to pray for throughout the time, that God would go before, that it would do what God wants it to do. And so 40 women have been praying for me for over a year.
Wow.
And just covering this in prayer. And I really believe this this book will do nothing if God doesn't go before it. And so I really want to thank them. I think it's the most important part of this book writing, this book launch, anything, is the prayer support that I've received.
It's amazing. I love that. I love when I hear about the community behind a book as well. Mm-hmm. We have this vision in our mind, maybe of an author quietly writing on their own, very, on their own, nobody around. And you don't realize how many people behind the scenes are there supporting the author through the process. So I always kind of like to bring them into the conversation too, because that's a big part of it, right?
Yes. And I also do want to mention my launch team. So I have 50 military spouses that I reached out to. And they've been incredibly helpful because, I only know so many military spouses. And I don't know, we didn't serve alongside any Marines. Well, I take that back. My husband may have, but I don't know a ton of Navy and Marines. And so I've reached out to them and they have helped me just spread the message. They've been so helpful in spreading it in their community, and especially to those younger spouses, right? Because I'm older now. My husband's no longer serving. And those younger military spouse, the one who is feeling, I can't do this, mm-hmm. I don't like this life, that's the one I want to reach. The one who's been doing it for 20 years most likely has figured out some of it. But that young military spouse who feels terribly alone, terribly unseen, that's the one I want it in her hands.
Yeah.
And so it's all them. They've been so helpful. I'm so appreciative.
So you had a crystal clear vision of who your reader would be during the writing process then?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the key things that you should, right? You gotta write to your person. Yeah. And she's that young military spouse. She's struggling. She hasn't learned to cope with the deployments, the isolation, the moving, the constant change. And she's looking for hope.
And I just picture her sitting in a sea of boxes. She can only find one shoe. She can't find her toothbrush. They're in a box somewhere here in this room. I have no idea where they are. But before I get overwhelmed with that, I'm going to pull out Beth's book and I'm going to read it. It's going to be my thing as I do this transition. Who, Beth, from your background in talking to all these amazing families in the military, who doesn't seem to do well in this kind of environment of constantly moving and upheaval and not having deep roots in community? Who doesn't seem to do well, and how do they cope?
The woman that doesn't do well has not figured out that she has to get out of her house and she has to engage with other people and she has to put herself out there. Mm-hmm. Loneliness is an epidemic in the United States right now. COVID made it worse. The Surgeon General of the U.S. came out, I believe, 2 years ago now and said that loneliness is not only detrimental to our mental health, it is detrimental to our physical health, as detrimental to our physical health as if you smoke 15 cigarettes a day.
Wow.
15. And we know how bad that is for us, right? Yeah. So the woman who struggles the most is the woman who is tired of putting herself out there, is insecure, will not try. And unfortunately, she is probably relying on her phone for her community. And this does not give our mental and spiritual well-being what we need. I'm sorry, I'm holding the phone. Yeah. It does not give us what we need as much as face-to-face communication, right? And our first couple of moves, I would spend 6 months to a year terribly lonely. Mm. And I became a believer during that time. And I said, I have to change this trajectory. I have to figure this out. I'm tired of being lonely because we were moving so frequently. And so I just decided to start putting myself out there. And I think one of the greatest things that I did is that I would meet someone and just say, here we go. We're going on the deep end. And I'm going to tell you that I'm not perfect and I don't have it all together. And I struggle too. I was vulnerable. And then I made quick, authentic friendships. You also realize the longer you're a military spouse is that the military community has an unending capacity to add new people to their circle of friends because their circle of friends is always changing. Either they are moving or their circle of friends are moving, or honestly, both. there are some great locals I've met and made friends with, but not all locals that have lived there for a while have capacity to add new people to their circle of friends. But the military does. We always have capacity. And honestly, one of the best friendships I ever made through this journey was someone I only lived with for 9 months. We still text weekly. We're still very engaged. She was at the end of her husband's military career, and we were somewhat at the beginning. And she invested in me. But yeah, you just have to say, I'm going to put on my big girl pants. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to try this event. Yes, I feel uncomfortable, but it is worth it because I will make a friend. And it doesn't have to be some people get a real bad attitude about some of the spouse functions. They can feel they're cliquey. I just said, I'm going to be a light at these. And honestly, the longer we were in, I would go to these spouse functions. I would specifically seek out the woman looking awkward standing in the corner.
Good.
And I would extend myself to her. And, I believe that's really 5 years in, God began calling me to do that, to see the unseen, to see the woman who was hurting. I started welcoming people every time they moved in, showing up at their house with 12 home-baked cookies and just saying welcome. But it blessed me because I was making all these new friends, even though I was serving, I was just investing in. Through those relationships and friendships, God sometimes opened doors for me to begin spiritually mentoring them as well. But, it's just showing people you care and giving them the courage to get out of their four walls and start to make friendships. It can be going to the dog park and introducing yourself to somebody, going to pickleball, going, to the gym, whatever it is. But it's like, hey, I see you here often. It's nice to meet you. And people don't turn that down.
Yeah.
And if they do, that's the person who's not supposed to be your friend anyways.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned your friend that invested in you.
Yes.
How does it feel now to be on the giving side of that? Now you're investing in others through your book. Mm-hmm. And now people are saying the same thing about Beth, that you're the one that invested in them. How does that make you feel, to kind of like a full circle for you?
I mean, it's exciting, and I feel unworthy at times too, right? Because I'm not perfect. I don't have it all figured out. But I'm thankful that I have that opportunity. I'm not going to do it perfectly, but yes, I'm very thankful. I just want to encourage, and pull them up. Really, reach down and help pull them out of the pit they're in, of loneliness and honestly despair and a lot of feeling sorry for yourself.
See, I see a book as a platform, as an opportunity to reach new people because you have a book you can come on and talk about, like on a podcast. It gives you an opportunity to get a message out because of the book. So how are you going to use this platform going forward? Well,
I would like to do some speaking at military bases. I did go through speaker certification with a ministry called Speak Up Ministries. It's Carol Kent, if you've ever heard of her. Her most famous book is Now I Lay My Isaac Down. I believe she's written over 30 books.
Wow.
So I do have a keynote that I'd love to address, just to reach more military communities. It's 3 lessons for learning to do more than just survive as a military spouse, but thrive. And beyond that, one of the things I'm looking forward to is resting. It's been a bit of a really fast-paced treadmill. But yeah, I just want to, I will continue to serve the military in my midst, because that's the people group that God has called me to. I believe they are a people group. We have our own language, all the acronyms, all the weird words. But yeah, just be faithful. I'm interested a little bit in working in theological content editing because I am such a nerd and a learner. I'd really like to do that. That's not just serving the military community, but serving the church as a whole. One of the things I learned in seminary is I just was burdened for more people to know and study sound theological doctrine. But I'm burdened for the people in the pews. I don't feel called to academia at this time. I'm just burdened for the men and women, across our world to just to dig better and to be more grounded in the scriptures and maybe not what someone says you should believe.
I like that. I like that a lot. Okay, so take us to your website. Where do we go to connect with you and get more information about the book, follow your journey, and, be part of your world? Where do we send everybody?
Great. Yeah, I do have a website. It's BethRunkle.com. That's BETHRUNKLE. I blog content for military spouses. That's what I do. And I'm on Instagram, Facebook. I have a YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is really just a repeat of, I do Instagram lives every week. I invite on usually a military spouse or an expert in the military spouse arena. And we talk about a topic relevant to military spouses. So moving yourself, reintegrating after deployment, which is a really hard part of our life. Dealing with deployment, helping your kids through the transitions, waiting, loneliness. So we'll talk about these topics. My YouTube just has those 15-minute interviews replayed there. My Instagram, Facebook is Beth Runkle Writes. That's Beth Runkle Writes, WRITES. And also you can go to anothermovegod.com. That's all one word. And that gives you access to my free leaders guide that accompanies the book so that people can engage in the book in small group studies. So it breaks the book up into a 6-week study with discussion questions and summary content and, leaders guide, small group guide, how to pray for your group. That's just a free resource because I believe we can get more out of the book if we'll engage in community, encourage one another. And because I'm such a big fan of creating your own community, it's just kind of a way for me to encourage people to create community around the book.
Excellent. Okay, before you go, thank you for doing this, by the way.
Yes, thank you.
Young family, new to the military, a new spouse going to be joining ranks, and they've never done this before. They're a little nervous. You get a chance to sit down with them, have a coffee or something, and they just have 1,000 questions for you. Mm-hmm. What's one word of encouragement you'd give to somebody who's newly entering this world that they just need to know? This one thing is where you'd start to talk to them about. What would you tell them?
Community.
Okay. And
I mean that you have to find your community. You have to get out there. Sometimes you have to cultivate community. Mm. We really learned to do that. My husband and I hosted. So I mentioned briefly that our marriage was tough, and that was because of me in the beginning. I don't think our marriage would have survived had we not become believers, just because I was so over it. But we went to a marriage conference, and at that marriage conference, they shared with us really what is the biblical view of marriage. And it just blew our mind because I had been schooled on how to be in a marriage by romantic comedies of the 80s and 90s. I love a good romantic comedy, but it's not the best marriage advice.
No.
A romantic comedy tells you should be happy. It should be easy. It should be fun. That is not what our marriage looked like. A biblical view of marriage is it's sacrificial. You give 100% and 100%. It's not 50-50. And really, you love your spouse sacrificially. You respect your spouse if you're the wife. It just dramatically changed our marriage. And at that conference, they shared that there were these small group guides that you could take this content back and you could have been sharing it with people around you. And at that point, we'd moved 4 times. We had most of our friends were military, and we said, this is stuff. We got to start sharing it. So we began doing that. We did that for the rest of the 11 moves. We would just show up, boots on the ground, barely unpack our boxes, maybe even not all of them, and start hosting people in our home. Because marriage is hard, but military marriages might be a little bit harder. Our divorce statistics are worse, especially in the veteran population when they're done serving. Mm. So that was such a blessing to us because we were bringing community into our home every week and forming that. Those were our people. And then also I was forming women, reading and studying the Bible in my home. And often that would start with me meeting one other woman and say, hey, do you want to do Bible study? And we would bring in all kinds of people, even people that weren't believers, just, hey, come be a part of our community and let's see if God's word might have to say something to you. So you have to cultivate your community. You have to try and get out there and make that invitation to others. That could also be another word, is invite. You meet somebody and you're like, you just have to say, hey, do you want to meet for coffee? Or, hey, do you want to bring your kids over and our kids will play in our backyard? You get out of your house, you hang out in base housing in the street with your kids in the afternoon and the evening. But community is the best part about the military life.
I love it. Beth, this is really good. I really appreciate you being on the show. And congratulations on your book.
Thank you so much.
Looking forward to seeing what's next for you down the road as you get rest and all that. The book is going to open doors for you, I know, and excited to see where it's going to take you. So thank you for writing this, and thank you for sharing for your community and giving back in such a great way. I know that your circle is probably very grateful for all that you've put out in the world and just how you and your husband have shown up and given so much back, serving your country, but serving your community at the same time. I love that you do both. So thank you for this.
Yes, and thank you for the opportunity to be on. And since you're in Canada, I want to say, and I know you have listeners from all over the world, right? I want to say thank you to every person out there who serves in uniform to protect the freedoms of their country, and to their spouse who makes the sacrifices. It is a sacrifice, but it is a calling. And I especially want to thank that spouse. The person serving in uniform tends to get a lot of accolades and claps. And, you always see them coming on the plane and the whole plane's clapping, right? But I see that military spouse. I see the sacrifices you make. I see you sitting with tears because you're just overwhelmed. And so right now, I am clapping for you. I'm clapping for you, and I see you, and I appreciate you.
Wow. Perfect way to end off. Thank you, Beth. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks,
great.
Dave. I appreciate it.
Excellent. Everyone, all the information is always in the show notes. Please go support Beth. Go grab a copy of the book, and when you do, please, I'm asking, leave an amazing review. Let somebody know why this is so important, why you found value in this book, and if you know anyone serving, please buy a copy and have it sent to them wherever they are serving around this world so that they'll have this as well. I want this to be sitting on top of those boxes at the next move, to be the first box they open. I want Beth's book in my hands as I'm surrounded by cardboard. I want to sit and read Beth's words and give me hope. So Beth, again, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for being here for the Living the Next Chapter podcast. So glad to have you as part of our family of listeners. There's a seat for you just here on Living the Next Chapter, and I'm so happy that you have listened to all the way to the end. Wow, you are now my new bestie. I want to let you know that I host 7 other podcasts on top of Living the Next Chapter. Yep, 8 total. One of them is called the How To Podcast series. If you are thinking, you know what, Dave, this podcast thing seems like a lot of fun, well, I'll give you a secret. It is. It's a great, amazing, fun time where you can get to meet great people, get your word out there, promote your book, promote what your coaching program, whatever you're doing. Podcasting is great. And if you want to learn how to do this, what you're hearing right now, head over to howtopodcast.ca and look up the How to Podcast series on YouTube, whatever app you're listening on. You'll find me there. And I'd love for you to come listen to how to do this. And if you're interested and have questions on how to podcast, reach out to me at howtopodcast.ca. Thank you for listening. Talk soon.